Thank you, Krista. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Covington City Council regular meeting for Tuesday, May 10th. This City Council meeting is being held telephonically and virtually in compliance with state executive and legislative actions responding to the COVID-19 emergency. With that, I'll call this meeting to order. And Krista, if you could please call the roll.
Yes. Councilmember Soltis?
Here.
Councilmember Harjahausen?
I am present.
Councilmember Simomo?
I'm here.
Councilmember Porter?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith?
I'm here as well.
Mayor Wagner?
I am here.
We have a quorum, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Krista. If everybody could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for that. Next up is approval of the agenda. Regan, do we have any changes tonight?
No, Mayor.
Thank you, Regan. With that, I'll move into approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Heard Christina first, move, and Sean seconded. Call for a roll call vote. Sean, how do you vote?
Aye.
Christina, how do you vote?
Aye.
Jennifer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Joe, how do you vote?
Aye.
Beth, how do you vote?
Aye.
I also vote aye. It is unanimous to approve the agenda as written. First up on public communication is Affordable Housing Week proclamation. And do we have anybody who is accepting this tonight?
Yes, we do have Chad, and he's being promoted to panelist.
Great. Welcome, Chad. Thank you for joining us tonight. And you're with the Housing Development Consortium of Seattle King County. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. My name is Chad Vacken. I'm the Advocacy and Mobilization Manager with the Housing Development Consortium. And I just want to say I super appreciate and thank you all for proclaiming May 8th to 14th as Affordable Housing Week. And for your recognition of just the need for affordable homes in our community. As we all know, like many community members many community members are living through, too many students are finding themselves that they don't have a stable place to call home, and too many families in our city are struggling to stay housed. And our goals throughout Affordable Housing Week are to not only call attention to the level of need in our community, but also to highlight the policy solutions and the important work that is currently being done to make a difference. So we hope that you can join us throughout the course of the week through the whole schedule of events that we have planned during the week. You can check those out at our website. But beyond that, we hope that you'll continue to support affordable homes in Covington with all the kind of tools that are available to you. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to issue this proclamation and for your dedication on the issue. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chad. Let me read the proclamation. Whereas all people should have access to safe, healthy, and affordable homes within communities of opportunity. And whereas united to raise public awareness, people, organizations, and communities throughout King County are participating in local Affordable Housing Week activities to elevate the critical need to create healthy communities with ample affordable housing. And whereas the City of Covington endorses the goals, objectives, and purposes of Affordable Housing Week, and in doing so, recommits itself to ensuring that our community thrives with opportunity and that all people in it live with dignity and affordable homes. And whereas united in an effort to raise public awareness, we will participate in local Affordable Housing Week efforts to inform the public of the critical need to preserve and or increase affordable housing in our communities. Now, therefore, we, the City Council of the City of Covington, do hereby proclaim May 15th through the 21st, to be Affordable Housing Week in the city of Covington, and encourage all citizens to join in their support for affordable housing in our community. So Chad, I will virtually hand you this proclamation. We'll make sure that you get a copy of it. And we really thank you for being here and pushing forward with the housing consortium to make sure that this affordable housing in our region continues to move forward in a positive manner. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Have a great evening, and thank you for being here tonight, Chad. Next, I have a proclamation here for National Public Works Week, and Mr. Linskov, welcome.
Mr. Mayor and Council, thank you.
I will read the proclamation, and if you have anything you'd like to say, then feel free to add to it. So whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities, and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Covington. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, who are engineers, managers, and employees responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting the services, structures, and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas the 2022 National Public Works theme is Ready and Resilient, and City of Covington Public Works Department employees are dedicated to this cause with their experience and efforts to the service of all our citizens. Now, therefore, we, the City Council of the City of Covington, do hereby proclaim the week of May 15th through the 21st of 2022 to be National Public Works Week in the City of Covington, and encourage all citizens to join in honoring public works employees who are dedicated to improving and maintaining the quality of life for present and future generations. And Bob, I'd like to virtually hand you this proclamation as well, and thank you and Don and everybody in Public Works for everything that you do to make sure that our city keeps moving and getting things done. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Bob?
Yeah, I would like to thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for all the faith and trust you put in us. And it allows us to do great things. And just thank you for your leadership role through the pandemic. You guys made some very difficult decisions. And I think we fit in quite well with being with this year's statement or whatever is we are resilient. And we just exited out of a pandemic, and we have $45 million of construction projects right now. So that's because of great leadership, and we'd like to thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you for being here tonight to accept this for the Public Works team.
You're welcome.
Thank you. With that, we will have our first of two public comment periods. Speakers will state their name, address, and organization. Comments are directed to the City Council, not the audience or staff. Comments are not intended for conversation or debate and are limited to no more than 4 minutes per speaker. Notice to all participants: pursuant to state law RCW 42.17a.555, campaigning for any ballot measure or candidate in City Hall and or during any portion of the council meeting, including the audience comment portion of the meeting, is prohibited. With that, I will open it up. So Andrew, you're moved over. You are on mute. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. My name is Andrew Barch. I'm a resident here in the City of Covington at 27047 200th Avenue Southeast. I'm also an avid skateboarder. I'm here actually to ask the council to request a detailed memorandum of understanding other than the one presented for the proposed electric scooter program under the business today. The memorandum of understanding listed as attachment 2 in the packet today, as it stands, appears to be in a generalized agreement. The MOU could further be expanded to include details such as definitions, such as what could be considered improperly parked, unused, unsafe, suspension, termination, modification of the plan. Specifics on what type of data sharing the city would like, for instance, like theft and vandalism, maintenance reports, complaints, accident and crash, active and repeat customers. Also, like what happens if something gets submerged in a Covington waterway, who picks up the cost of that? I've noticed other cities, and this is why I'm going through this. I just have a few more things. Relocation request response times defined. Unsafe and inoperable scooter removal times defined. Also listing the maximum speed you want them to go to. And then another important piece I noticed was having in the insurance section, add the city officials, employees, and agents as additionally insured on the liability policies. That would be by the vendor, and that protects the city as well. I noticed part of my research I did ahead of this, and thank you for providing the packet too ahead of time. The city of Green Bay, Wisconsin has a PDF of their MOU searchable online. And that's kind of where I did some of my research. So it's very detailed, and it appeared to be written by the city instead of, I don't know where the MOU that's currently listed as attachment 2 was there. But if you could look at it expanding that, that would be my comments.
Great, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Appreciate you providing comment tonight. Thank you for joining us. Is there anybody else in the audience wishing to provide comments during this portion? We do have a public hearing later on for testimony on the proposed 6-year transportation improvement program. So if you have comments for that, please wait till that time. Jonathan, welcome.
Good evening. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yes, welcome, Jonathan.
Excellent. There was some funny stuff going on with the muting, unmuting. I would like to reiterate everything Andrew suggested. I was going to make several of those comments myself, but he did it much better than I could. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Is there anybody else in the audience wishing to address council this evening? Is anybody in the audience? Please raise your hand if you're wishing to address council. Seeing nobody raise their hand, we will have a second opportunity towards the end of our meeting. Next is executive session. This is to evaluate the qualifications of a candidate for appointment to an elective office pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, subsection 1, subsection H. Council, you received a executive session Zoom meeting. So if you could leave this meeting and join the new executive session, and then we will rejoin back. And I would say 20 minutes for this executive session. If we need more time, I'll come back and state that. Does that work for you, Krista?
Mayor, can you please provide an exact time that you intend to return?
Yes, 7:33.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, council. We will see you shortly. Thank you, Krista. Mark, go ahead.
Yes, because you came back early, we're going to need to take a brief 10-minute recess just to make sure that anyone who thought you'd be coming back in 10 minutes from now isn't going to miss anything if they were interested in hearing that. So thank you. Is that all right with you, Mayor, to
Yes.
take a recess and then come back and make sure for transparency with the public?
Okay, that is perfectly fine.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sir. Thank you, Krista. Welcome back, everyone, to the Covington City Council meeting for Tuesday, May 10th. We had a short recess after coming out of our executive session where we evaluated the qualifications of a candidate for appointment to an elective office pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, subsection 1, subsection H. With that, we are moving into approval of the consent agenda, which consists of items C1 through C4. Look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Joe and seconded by Jennifer. Call for a roll call vote. Sean, how do you vote?
Aye.
Jennifer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Christina, how do you vote?
Aye.
Joe, how do you vote?
Aye.
Beth, how do you vote?
Aye.
I also vote aye. It is unanimous to approve the consent agenda, items C1 through C4. Next, we will move into a public hearing. Tonight, we have a public hearing to receive testimony from the public regarding the proposed 6-year 2023 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program. This being the date set and proper notices having been posted and published in accordance with state and local law. The public hearing is hereby declared open. And Bob, welcome. You're given the update today.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I think Krista is going to help me with a PowerPoint presentation. And so we will probably start right there. As you know, this evening I'll be presenting a draft of the 2023 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Plan. Next page, please. During this time, we'd like to share with you progress on last year's transportation plan, and we'd like to give you the opportunity to provide feedback or make changes. Next page, please. I'm sorry. In agenda item 1, attachment 2 your packets, you will see the draft of the 6-year transportation improvement plan map. This draft should look quite familiar to you. It provides a quick visualization to transportation needs within the city. Next page, please. In agenda item 1, attachment 1 of your packets, a summary of the 6-year tip can be found. The proposed draft prioritization list remains nearly the same as council determined last year. Next page, please. As updates for projects in our 6-year plan, construction for our 516 and Jenkins Creek widening project officially started this Monday. We're pretty excited about that. We have some ILAs that will be coming your way to work with utilities in the area. As far as the Covington Connector 204th project goes, it's nearly complete, and we finished the majority of paving on 204th this evening. Next page, please. As far as Covington Connector and Lake Point Boulevard goes, it's our belief that developer will most likely begin construction of Lake Point Boulevard within the next 1.5 years. Moving on to Covington Connector SR 18, we're around 30% complete by cost, and that project's moving along quite well. As far as 256 goes, we are cautiously optimistic in our fish barrier removal grant application that we submitted a few months back. And we're cautiously optimistic in getting future TIB funds for right-of-way and construction. So keep your fingers crossed there. Next page, please. Our 516 and Covington Way project paused design at 30%. We're conducting a corridor study with the assistance of WashDOT and Transpo. As far as our 516 and 185th Avenue Southeast to 192nd widening project, we've proceeded past 30% design, and within the next few months or towards fall, we will bring ILAs with Kent Water and Covington Water and Sioux Creek for interlocal agreement to assist with designing that project. Next page, please. As you probably noticed, there are no new additions to our 6-year tip this year. The few items that were on last year's tip for the 2022 include our citywide safety project, which involved rectangular rapid flashing beacons, as well as our safe routes to school through the Timber Lane and those improvements there. We believe we will complete both those projects this year. And we had a bid opening for the RRFB project last week. And the bids were right around the engineer's estimate. And so we'll be coming back to you. If it's not tonight, it will be next council asking for your approval to award. Next page, please. The remaining attachments in your packet include the projects and their descriptions and costs. In the interest of time, I could refrain from going through each of those projects, and I could open up to questions and guidance you may want to provide us. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
The ground rules for public comment during the public hearing are as follows. When your name is called, step up. Give your name, state whether you're a resident of the city of Covington, and please limit your comments to 4 minutes. The city clerk will set a timer that will go off when your time is up. When the timer goes off, please wind up properly. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to address council concerning the proposed 6-year 2023-2028 Transportation Improvement Program? Please raise your hand. Anybody in the audience wishing to address council concerning the 6-year TIP? Seeing nobody raise their hand, I will call this public hearing closed with a bang. And council, do you have any questions for Bob on the 6-year TIP? Beth?
Yeah, not really a question. If it's a comment or
Yes.
opinion, I guess. I'm going to advocate again for the Covington Way Wax Road interchange to get bumped up higher on the list. I see it's number 11. I would prefer to see it move to position 6 and then have number 7 go down to number 11. I mean, I understand that we're trying to build out Kent Kangley, but that is going to be a far at the rate it can be challenging to get that much funding. I feel like that intersection is really, really dangerous. And I don't know that it necessarily needs to be a roundabout, but if there's an opportunity to, we're talking about driven by development, and maybe we can get the developers to pay for part of it, but developers are in there right now, and that area is going to start getting busy, and we need to do something to keep our residents safe. And that's my opinion on that. So what it's worth.
Just as a quick note, as part of that development, they are adding an eastbound left turn that will be a flashing yellow arrow. So it will have the ability to protect some of those left turns during busier times.
Okay, and it's a flashing yellow, but will there also be a green?
Yeah,
left
that's
turn?
yeah,
Okay,
that's
okay,
part of that operation. Yes.
okay, thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
helpful.
Thank you, Beth. Sean? You're on mute, sir.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate the update. I was joking with Regan earlier today. I'm like, is it tip already? I was like, wow, it seems like it comes around faster and faster every year. A couple of things. I'm a couple comments and then a question or request. I'm really excited about those flashing beacons going in the on the roundabouts, and I know I've seen online and heard from people that they're interested in that as well. So when those do go in, let's make sure that we let the public know. I think in one sense, it's going to take a while for the traffic to become conditioned now to that there being those flashing beacons. So I think any heads up we can give them to let them know it's coming, that would be great. Also, when we do the fish passage or fish barrier removal on 256, I think we should do a lot of additional outreach on that too. If there's any images or media we can take of that, I think that's a big deal to show that we are trying and doing our best to address those historic culverts that we have. So, and then kind of like Beth, I guess I would advocate, I did see that there are no new construction projects on there, but I'll again advocate like I did last year for repaving along 256 from Seuss Creek up to, I think it's like 1/3, no, 1/60th or short of there, you know, it's time for that road to get repaved. So. Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Sean.
Yeah.
We have a little back burner potential to address that, but we're gonna keep mum about it.
Anybody else have any questions for Bob? And just for clarification for those in the audience, on the list of items on our 6-year TIP, any of those items would move up on the list if we were to receive grants ahead of time to get that accomplished, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other questions, Bob, thank you very much for a great presentation. And this comes back to council at a future council meeting for final approval.
Yes.
All right. Is there anything else you need from us, Bob?
Well, do we need determination if you guys would like to move the Covington Way and Wax Road up on the list?
Is there consensus for that? Or do we want to leave it where it's at? I see 2 thumbs up. Oh, 3, 4. Okay. So I guess the council, the majority wishes to move it up.
Will do. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Thanks, Bob. All right, that concludes our public hearing tonight. Thank you all very much. We'll move into new business. Item number 2, consider a possible appointment to fill council position number 3. Does council wish to take any action tonight or comments, or what would they like to proceed with?
I would like to move to reopen the application process and to select a date that's mutually agreed upon by council for that new application date.
Joe?
I would second that, but I would like to add that the applications be in by May 31st, so we can look at them on June 10th at our meeting then, and then schedule either for interviews on the 24th of June or our other list of options that we have tonight as well.
Okay, so there's been a motion to reopen for more letters of interest with a caveat of making May 31st the final date to accept those letters of interest for council position number 3. Jennifer, would you like to speak to that motion?
I would. So, you know, based on my history with council, we have seen a much larger pool of applicants, and while our existing pool of just 2 people is fine, it would behoove us to have to throw the opportunity out there and to make the pool larger and hopefully garner the interest that we've seen in past times. If that's the reasoning for the motion.
Thank you, Jennifer. Joe, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, I want to add the caveat that we're not saying that the applications we have aren't good. We are going to keep these applications. We're just opening and asking to see if there are more people in our community who would like to apply for this position. And then on the 10th, we will then look at the applicants we have now and any further applicants who have come in. And I just want to make sure that the people who have applied understand that, but also that the people who haven't applied yet, who are thinking about it, know that this is your chance and we are not going to extend it again.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I was just thinking that I agree with most of what's been said so far. I am concerned about pushing it out to reviewing them on the 14th. That only gives us a month, which might be enough time, but there's a lot going on. I don't know if 10 days extension would be enough time.
Okay.
Just throwing that out there as a thought. I feel like it
Thank
might
you, Beth.
give us more time.
there anybody else wishing to speak for or against the motion? So the motion before us is to reopen for more letters of interest due by May 31st, which we would review them on our June 14th council meeting. And it's been moved and seconded for that. Any other comments for or against that motion? Joe?
I just wanted to say, I think I said June 10th and I meant June 14th, so I don't know if we have to amend. So I just wanted to make sure, I meant June 14th.
Right, that's what I stated.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make sure we were good. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, anybody else for or against the motion? All right, it's been moved and seconded to reopen and ask for more letters of interest due by May 31st, which we would then review at our June 14th meeting. I'll call for a roll call vote. Sean, how do you vote?
Aye.
Christina, how do you vote?
Aye.
Jennifer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Joe, how do you vote?
Aye.
Beth, how do you vote?
Aye.
I also vote aye. It is unanimous to reopen and ask for more letters of interest to give more time for more people to submit their letters. Thank you, council. Mark, is there anything else you need, or Krista, on that?
Nothing else from me. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mark. Does that work for you, Krista? Okay, thank you. All right. Next up is new business. Item number 3 is to consider appointment to the Arts Commission. Does council wish to take action tonight?
I would make a motion to appoint Riley Reed to the Arts Commission position 2 for a 3-year term with a term expiring May 31st, 2025.
Thank you,
Second.
Beth. Thank you,
Second.
Sean. It's been moved and seconded to appoint Riley Reed to fill position number 2 for a 3-year term on the Arts Commission with a term expiring May 31st, 2025. Beth, would you like to speak to your motion?
I was just really impressed with her perspectives and her reasoning and passion for applying. And I think she said something about letting people know where she's from and where she lives, and people say, what's that and who goes there? And she wants people to know what Covington is and why people should come here. And I thought that was prolific in my mind.
Thanks, Beth. Sean, would you like to speak to your second?
Yeah, I was struck by Riley's honesty and her view on Covington. She had a unique take on things. I thought her discussing the Grand Canyon of Covington was interesting. I'd never heard that before. So I think she's going to bring a lot of energy to this commission, and I will support her.
Thank you, Sean. Is there anybody else wishing to speak for or against the motion? I just want to add that, like, going off what Beth said, that she wanted to, bring more attention to Covington and stuff. And then we will go from that interview, we went right into Cetus, where they talked about the X factor. I don't know if that was planned or not. I doubt it, but that was perfect. And I like the fact that Riley talked about collaboration, creating events, and getting her whole team together to make things happen. And she wasn't afraid to get out there and talk to anybody, no matter what size they were. So I will support this nomination as well. So it's been moved and seconded to appoint Riley Reed to fill position number 2 for a 3-year term on the Arts Commission with a term expiring May 31st, 2025. I'll call for a roll call vote. Sean, how do you vote?
Aye.
Christina, how do you vote?
Aye.
Jennifer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Joe, how do you vote?
Aye.
Beth, how do you vote?
Aye.
I also vote aye. It is unanimous to appoint Riley Reed to fill position number 2. Thank you all very much. Next is new business item number 4, the 2024 periodic comprehensive plan update process. So Lena, welcome.
Hi, good evening, Council and Mayor. Can everyone hear me? I'm hardwired, so I want to make sure. Cool,
can hear
thank you. I've got a presentation for you tonight. We're going to run through the exciting, embarkment that we're going to have here on comprehensive planning. So just bear with me here one second. Of course, it wants to ask me to do all the things right now. That's funny. Okay, I don't know why I'm getting this box down here, but we won't worry about it. So I've got about 6 bullets here that I'm going to run through tonight. Ryan Harriman, our planning manager, generally does this with me. Unfortunately, he is not feeling well tonight, so I'm going to do my best to cover kind of his talking points. Try to keep it as high level as I can with the hopes that we can just have some robust questions at the end. Mayor, I will leave it up to you whether we want to do questions midway through or at the end. I can accommodate whatever is the pleasure of the council.
I will actually leave it up to you. And
okay. Why don't we go ahead and make it a conversation? Let's if
okay.
There's something, but if I can have you pause me and call on folks, that would be great. Thank you.
Yep. So council has questions, just raise your hands and I'll call on you.
All right, great. Thank you, Mayor. So just to kind of get us grounded in what is comprehensive planning, and Covington's gone through a few of these. We incorporated in 97, so our first one launched then, and every 8 years since then, we've gone through this process. So the last time we were here was in 2015. The comprehensive plan really starts with the Growth Management Act. So that was adopted in the 90s, which basically said, hey, cities, you are growing so fast and we are growing very uncoordinated. So let's get together and figure out how to have more coordinated growth and to really think about how we're accommodating our population. And so what came out of that were comprehensive plans, and there's different layers to this that I'll walk through. And really comp planning is just the centerpiece of our local efforts to get organized around our growth and employment numbers as we think about the future of our city. There's about 14 goals that are outlined in the GMA, and so those are listed here. Those goals really haven't changed much. They're still very much in line with where we are today. However, some of the county-wide planning policies do take an extra lens and layer on some of these particular goals. The map you see here, if you're not familiar with this, this is basically Washington. There's about 39 cities, 39 counties, and within King County, there's about 39 cities. And so each one of these counties within Washington has to do some level of comprehensive planning. And so you see the green there are those that have to plan fully. The blue are those that are opted in, so they were not considered fast growing, but they wanted to do comp planning. And then the ones there in the gray, they just have to really account for those critical and natural areas. What this map does, or what this figure doesn't show, is kind of the timeline that we're embarking on for comprehensive planning. So within the state of Washington, this timeline really is going from December 2024 through 2027, with King County, Snohomish County, and Pierce County really taking the lead and having to update our comprehensive plans by 2024. The rest of those counties kind of follow suit through 2027. So this map here is a little bit of kind of our effort of showing how this effort works, what the framework is for comp planning. So kind of you have these nested circles here. It really starts with GMA. It rolls down into Vision 2050. So for those of us in the Puget Sound region, that is the multi-county planning policies. That's the role of PSRC to oversee the Puget Sound Regional Council. Though that Vision 2050 framework rolls down into the countywide planning policies. For us, that's the King County countywide planning policies, ultimately down to the local comprehensive plan, which is us, and then our implementing structures, which is our regulations. So there's kind of these little outputs and inputs that occur throughout the process. So, how do we know what to plan for? How do we know what to build for? And the data really comes from the U.S. Census, which is through the OFM, the Office of Financial Management. And also, we get to feed forward information into this system through our buildable land survey, which the council in the city adopted last year. And I'll talk a little bit more about those numbers throughout the presentation. So all of that information kind of gets put into this, where we look at those initial 2044 population numbers and job growth numbers. That information then is used to inform the frameworks from the multi-county planning policies, that Vision 2050, all the way down to Covington's ultimate comprehensive planning framework. Really, the important thing too that I like to just point out is that at the end of the day, Covington will need to have our comprehensive plan certified by the Puget Sound Regional Council. And why that's important is because they really kind of manage that funding source for us. So if we want grants, state money, federal money, that money generally flows through them. They're going to want to make sure that we have elements that are consistent with this framework in order for them to allocate us money. So that certification is really important. We are hopeful that, having been here in 2015, that was a bit of a journey when it came to our growth numbers. I'm not anticipating that issue this year. So this is our current comprehensive plan. The table on the left is what we have listed in our comp plan today. So you can go read through these elements now. What you have on the in the blue chart are the mandatory versus optional comprehensive plan elements. So we meet all of the mandatory requirements currently, and then we do opt in for economic development and parks. And again, those two are not funded elements, meaning that Commerce and PSRC don't really allocate monies to those elements per se, but they do look for those elements if they're wanting to give you money, right? So it's important that we have an economic development chapter or element in our comprehensive plan, as well as our park and rec, but they are technically optional. And then this slide, I just put in here for a purpose because we've got a lot going on in Covington right now. And the council, you've embarked on the strategic plan. We've got comp plan, we've got pros plan, we've got capital. We just heard about the tip tonight, and kind of how does this all work together? So this was our attempt at kind of identifying this, this continuous circle of how we do the business side of this. So we set our work priorities through the comp plan and through the strategy. We send our funding priorities through our budget and our capital improvement plan, which is also an element of the comprehensive plan. We implement those priorities through our legislative requirements, initiatives that the council sets forth for the city, and then any really code and policy updates that are come out of the comp plan. And then obviously we set those policy priorities through other guiding documents as well. So this was just kind of an attempt to tie all these things together and kind of really show how they work, and they really are going to rely on each other. So the comp plan is a fundamental part of this process. So I'll pause there for a second. Is there any questions of the council at this moment?
John.
What do you got, Sean?
Yeah, thank you, Selena. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm just curious, so going back to the conflict, the issue we had with PSRC a few years ago, this one right here, I'm just curious to hear why you're confident that our growth management plan will pass muster this time. And then follow up, it seemed back then that there were kind of, well, there's two messages. We're obviously hearing from, and we just did it tonight, had a resolution on affordable housing. And so we're getting a lot of push from some entities on expanding our affordable housing. And then it seemed like PSRC was saying, we shouldn't be expanding. So anyway, I'd be curious for any clarity on that.
Yeah, I'll answer your first question first. So how do I feel confident? Well, I'm kind of relying on, I'm stepping into this. I've looked at the data, I've looked at the buildable lands information, and I've consulted with Burke on this and the planning team about kind of what that process felt like, last year when we went through it. And it sounds like it went well, it went pretty well. And in fact, that we were allowed to absorb a little bit more growth than maybe what we had originally intended, where a couple other cities, didn't want to take on that much. So I think the fact that they actualize that through the countywide planning policies through the buildable lands gives us a little bit of standing there. But that's not to say, with the affordable housing conversation, that I don't know how deep that's going to go in opening up kind of that bigger, conversation. And I'll talk a little bit about that shortly, but there's still a little bit more to be seen there. I think that we have Lake Points pretty much in the books, and I think that was a big crux of the issue in 2015. I've validated that our numbers now do include that growth that's allocated to that area within the city, as well as kind of really looking at what the rest of the city can absorb. So I'm hopefully optimistic, and that's what's kind of giving me that confidence of just what we've been through in 2021. But you do raise a very good point with the introduction of the affordable housing. And I think we have a little bit more to see on that, to see how that unfolds. And I'll talk on that a little more later, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great.
I just had a follow up on that,
Okay.
but go ahead. Yeah.
Can I jump in real quick, Sean, on that? So another thing that happened in 2015, it may have happened early 2016, but we were reclassified from a small city with PSRC. And so that allowed us to absorb more growth, like Selena mentioned. So that's a big help and gives us a lot of confidence moving forward with regional planning. On the state side, about PSRC back then saying Covington, you need to stop growing, and the state saying you need to increase your housing stock. Yeah. That is the contradiction, and that was part of the problem with the middle missing housing bills. Is there was no coordination between regional planning entities, cities, counties, and the state in that. And that's primarily why that failed. So we'll see if anything changes as those bills move forward.
Yeah, I think that, and I've got in my staff, council and staff comments, I'll say a little more. I think we're going to see more of the push for affordable housing. So I think we need to be thinking about how we're going to incorporate that into our comprehensive plan. So.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I just went to a training on it yesterday, and my mind just keeps expanding on how we're gonna land all this. So we're up for it, right? We can do it. Okay. Any other questions before I move along?
I do not see anybody else. Okay. Selena, go ahead.
Okay. So these are the recent legislative updates, and I know that you've heard most of this, but I'm just going to touch on the ones that really apply to comprehensive plan. So obviously we have House Bill 1220. So that's kind of the big one, and that's setting a ton of guiding framework and policy requirements for cities to incorporate into their housing element. The only thing is, though, is that the Department of Commerce is creating that framework, and that framework's not going to be done until later this year. So, but that's okay, because Covington, the way that we're going to kind of talk about our roadmap, we're actually in a pretty good spot to be able to show up to the table and have some good conversations as that's unfolding. But ultimately, that's going to be a huge guidance for us. And right now, and I believe, Regan, you've been part of these conversations too, so feel free to jump in. They're looking at allocating that responsibility similarly like they allocate growth, right? So there's kind of this percentage of absorption that cities would take on within that number. They've made it very clear based on the training that I went to yesterday, which was PSRC, the housing consortium, I cannot say that word, sorry, the housing group.
Consortium.
Thank you, consortium. The housing group, PSRC, and Commerce were there. So, they're making sure to make it very clear that everyone's going to be taking on some allocation of affordable housing, and how that framework is going to be rolled out later this year. They're thinking maybe Q3, Q4 even. So that's a little bit on House Bill 1220. Then you've got the Senate Bill 5818. That just basically expanded SEPA to provide appeal protections for development regulations for housing capacity and affordability. So kind of just setting that up so that cities can navigate potentially those issues a little easier. The next one is really about process. So the big change here was that they changed the date from June 2024 to December 31st, 2024 for cities that are planning by the 2024 deadline to have their comp plan update. They have dedicated some funding to that, so we'll be keeping our eyes open to see if there's opportunities for grants to help offset the costs of the comp plan. Those have not fully rolled out yet, so we're kind of keeping our eyes and our ears tuned to that. And there will be some additional money to implement House Bill 1220. The next bill here is about tribal participation. So just making sure that we're bringing our tribes along in the planning process. And that we are just, enhancing our communication through them. And we do a pretty good job working with the Muckleshoots. They tend to be pretty involved in our processes now, but we will be highlighting that as an opportunity in our public engagement plan. And then this last one doesn't really apply to us, but I put it here just as an FYI. So basically, this one's just kind of saying that cities, if you want to extend your urban growth boundaries, we can't be taking surface areas or lands that are highly encumbered by critical areas and wetlands. So really all we have left in our UGA is the notch portion. So this doesn't really apply to us, but if for some reason in the future we were able to expand our UGA, we would want to just know about this. So with that, I will pause on the legislative updates.
Any questions? Beth?
Yeah, Selena, thank you. Great presentation so far. So just a really quick clarification on the one that doesn't apply to us, but is still going to affect us, the UGA, the Senate Bill 5593. So they're talking about changing the urban growth area, but then it says changes can't increase the total surface area. So are they just talking about density within a set UGA already, or?
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure because I didn't dive into this one as much because it was kind of like, it doesn't really apply to us. But what it's really just getting at is that one, that cities are kind of more diligent about what areas outside in unincorporated King County that we're gonna want to, if we want to expand our UGA and go through that process, making sure that that we're bringing in areas that aren't highly encumbered. That was kind of the big takeaway, right? So, and that whatever you do take needs to be suitable for that growth. So, I believe that first one, that changes in the UGA cannot increase the total surface area of the UGA. I'm not exactly sure what that's meant by that. I apologize. I can get more clarity for you, but like I said, I skirted over that one because
that's fair. No, I can look into it.
Okay. Okay. So now we're just going to kind of jump into Vision 2050. And why I wanted to pause and talk about this is, I think it's really important to kind of really understand this kind of nesting of how policies and frameworks trickle down to the cities and really kind of where our guidance comes from. So obviously we talked about the Vision 2050, that's the multi-county planning policies. I've listed here some of their increased emphasis that they have this year in their plan. So they're really looking at healthy communities, equity and inclusion, that job housing balance, right? So are people kind of, what is, and that's tied into that commute length. Obviously infill, that missing middle housing types. While the bill didn't pass, they are talking about those different housing types within the framework. Climate change, really driving towards multimodal transportation, and then basically just building in some resilience, right, from an emergency management perspective. And I think COVID really taught us a lot there that I think that they want cities to consider in their resiliency. The King County-wide planning policies, these were just recently adopted. I know some of you sit on boards that probably looked at these and reviewed them. They also, those policy decisions or that framework from Vision 2050 trickles down into the countywide planning policies, but they can get a little more narrower about what they want the cities within King County to do. And so I've just listed a few here. They're very much in line with what you saw in 2050. They're just getting a little more specific. One thing that I do want to point out, and it might be on the next slide here because I've got 2 slides of this. Yeah, the equity and planning. So this has come up amongst the planning community and kind of how are we handling equity amongst planning? What does that really mean when we say we look through it through a lens? How do we know we're doing that right? And this is actually a conversation, I'll be coordinating with Daphne and our team who oversees the ECJS commission, and kind of, thinking about that. But Commerce did say that they're going to be rolling out a tool for cities to use. So, as we learn about that, we'll be bringing our commission and the council along on that. The other thing that they're really promoting too is just transportation, right? Like how are we reducing our miles traveled? How are we reducing our trip gens, things of that nature? Are we accommodating that the traffic needs within the region? And then obviously the environmental aspect. So I'll kind of pause there. I went through those pretty quick, but I think some of you are very familiar with those.
Council, have any questions? I do not see any hands. So
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So, so you did get a copy of this presentation in your packet tonight. This is one slide that I just put in today because I thought it, something that I was missing originally. But when we talk about this regional growth forecast, when we kind of see these data numbers, it really stands out, right? So in Vision 2050, they're anticipating the region. And when I say region, I'm just talking about the Puget Sound region, right? So the 4 counties that are in PSRC, which are Pierce, Snohomish, King, and Kitsap, that they're seeing that they're anticipating that 1.6 million people will be here between 2018 and 2050. And along with that will be 1.1 million jobs. So we really have this big gap to fill in the next 20 years to think about how we are going to accommodate those people, those jobs, those urban centers, and really what does that do for our region? I just think those numbers are really important. I wanted to share that with you. And this is in their Vision 2050 with a lot more data points as well. So what does that mean for us, right? So now we're going to take all this framework that's been evaluated kind of, at the county levels all the way down to the city levels. And we need to start thinking about what will Covington look like in 2044. So knowing that our allocations, we're now designated a city and a town through the countywide planning policies. Our growth targets, we've got about 4,000 plus housing units that they're allocating to us, and about 4,000, roughly 500 new jobs to absorb that out of that million. So really what staff's going to be working on with the help of consultants for the next roughly 32 months is what will we look like? What is that guidance? How do we want to see Covington grow? And then, how do we build that community? We accommodate that population, all the things that really go within that growth that really promotes our values and our priorities within the city. So that's the big question. I think we're going to be spending a lot of time working through the solutions to that. So are there any questions so far? I'm almost done. I'm going to try to speed this up here.
I have one question.
Okay,
Cindy.
what do you got?
Can you go back 2 slides? Right there.
This one? Okay.
Nope.
Nope.
Go forward one more.
Oh, right here.
Right there. So the growth targets you have there, those are the additional housing units over and above what we currently have that they are allocating to us. Is that correct?
Yeah, so these are the numbers that came out of your buildable lands. So these were the allocations that came, and these numbers do include Lake Point. So I did validate that as well. So the one thing, so you've got about 1,600 units of housing slated for Lake Point and over 1 million square feet of commercial.
Yes.
That I haven't done the equation to like what that would be for jobs, but when you kind of take that out, you know, it's a percentage of that number. And then I will just tell you, we've got a couple hundred units in the pipeline right now, just that are under review by the city. So, you know, it seems like a big number, and I think staff at some point will try to maybe graph some of this out if we can get our heads wrapped around it, just to kind of see that projection within Covington.
No, the reason I brought that up is because of what the issue we went through before, where they said no, that was the ceiling number that we had, and versus the floor and the ceiling and stuff. So I just want to make sure I was clear, so that when I'm in the next PSRC meeting and subcommittees, that if they bring it up, I know where I'm sitting at the same place where you are.
Yeah, no, I understand that. A little bit like how I like to think about this is that you know, this is not a thou shall, you know, have 4,300 units by 2044, right? What it's saying is that Covington, you need to anticipate and prepare yourself for that number to be accommodated within your city. And it's a little nuanced, but I think it's just a different way to think about it in some ways, of like, we're planning for that number, right? And what we get is going to be kind of what we get, right? Because we don't really get to control that lever as much, but at least we can say with confidence, you know, we gave this some thought and we've prepared ourselves for that.
Perfect. Thanks, Selena.
Yeah.
Sean.
I think to.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just, to clarify the mayor's question, these are new
Yes.
housing and job targets, not necessarily added onto our old targets.
Correct.
Right. Does that make sense, Mayor?
Yeah, no, that's what I was at. Selena clarified it, because I just wanted to make sure that during the meeting that you and I attended, where everybody was on the same page, and then somebody came in and threw a wrench into it and changed everything at the last minute.
Yeah.
I'm just wanting to make sure I'm on the same plane and playing field at this point. So moving forward, we can continue to push where everybody else is at, not one individual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Regan. Thanks, Selena.
Yeah, no problem.
Sean.
So,
Yeah, I just had a quick question, kind of similar to that. And then the back one slide with the projections for the county. How accurate have past projections been? Have they been underestimates? Have they been overestimates? I'm just curious what the county's track record is in estimating growth, because it looks like it's just going to continue to go up. But I wonder, is 1.6 million? Is that the high, the low, the average?
Yeah, that's a really good question that I can't answer. I will tell you that the Planning Commission asked a somewhat similar question. You know, and something that I put on my action items kind of as we go through this process over the next few months is to maybe actualize some of those numbers. They used to release data year over year that said, if you know, here's your growth target and what cities are driving towards. Like, they used to track that, and I need to get plugged back in a little bit to see if that's still occurring, so we could see what that kind of graph is over time. I know when we did this in 2015, especially when we were having that conversation about growth allocations, you know, these southern county or these southern cities within King County were growing exponentially, like 100 times, right? And where they'd really put some of this growth in, like the Kirklands and Redmonds and Sammamish, they actually were growing slower than had previously participated or anticipated. So I don't know what that actualization has been, but it's a question that we probably will dig into, because it keeps coming up. I think we need to find an answer to that, just out of curiosity, if anything.
Beth.
Oh, you're muted, Beth.
Thank you. So I guess where I'm having a hard time, and I think you explained it, but I think it's probably important. This term vision, right? You're talking about the nuanced nature of, it really isn't a vision, as in we picked our city's vision, a company picks a vision, that's what they're aiming for. It's more of a projection 2050, right? I mean, the way you just said it is,
Yeah.
they're driving to a certain number, but it's kind of not really driving the car, kind of sitting back in the passenger seat, letting the vehicle go and seeing where it goes. I have a hard time with the terminology, and I think that's why it seems like we're trying to hit that number, because that's what we want to do, not that's probably what's going to happen. So we just need to be prepared for it. It's like how you put it.
Yeah.
So eloquently, but yeah. Right? Am I?
Yeah, and let me see if I'm understanding you correctly. So, you've got what they call Vision 2050, and that's kind of their new one. They've had like Vision 2020, Vision 2030, they do that, but it's essentially the framework. So the folks, through the multi-county planning policy, that countywide programming, they look at like job centers, they look at the ports, they look at these cities that are growing. A lot of it has to do with work centers or regional centers, and really trying to drive that growth around those centers, as well as the RTA. That's another element that they look at as well. And so, the idea is that you're condensing that growth into those areas. So obviously they're going to be allocated higher numbers. And I think the question earlier is like, does that really happen? How has that really been implemented? I don't know that I don't have an answer to that other than we're seeing things happen. But what those data points are, I'm not aware of. But it does work. And if I'm not answering your question, please cut me off. But it also, the idea of that kind of framework, that nesting. So you've got the GMA all the way down to the comp plan. It also works back upwards. So if Covington and all the cities within their comp plan follow the frameworks that are assigned through them, if you were to work backwards, Covington's piece in that larger framework, if we do our part correctly, then that larger, and everyone does the same thing, then that larger framework should work. So it's, they're not setting policy guide. Well, it's kind of is policy guidance. It's not really like code requirements for cities. It's really a framework, right? But leaving some autonomy at the local level, right? Because we get to choose how we want to grow. We just now have some bumpers that say you're going to think about 4,500 units, and this many jobs. And so what do you want to do within those bumpers? I don't know if that answers the question very well.
I think
okay.
It's good for now. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Is there anything else on that?
Nope, I don't see anybody else.
Okay.
Thanks, Selena.
Great. So these are my last couple slides. So how are we going to do this? Like, what is our plan? So what we really thought about in this CD department is really thinking about this in kind of various phases. So we're doing a lot of pre-work right now. We're initiating a lot of work. Our next phase, phase one, the analysis phase, this one's going to be kicking off pretty quickly. So during this phase, we're going to do a couple things. We are going to do an audit of our comp plan. So we're going to take what the existing comp plan says today, because we did a pretty good job last time around. And we're going to just kind of do a quick gap analysis to see what specific policy areas we need to evaluate and or look at to meet that framework requirement. So basically, we're not throwing out what we did before and starting over. We're going to use that as our base, and we're going to build upon that to make sure that we're meeting those framework, that the goals and policy and action items drive towards that that vision 2050 framework. The other thing that we're going to be doing is an engagement plan. So we were doing some work with our commissions at this point to get really clear on our public engagement. This is a require of GMA, is how do we bring our citizens along and how do we meet them where they're at to really get them engaged on this, on the comp plan update. And then the big thing that we are going to land in phase one is our housing needs assessment. So House Bill 1220 has really driven a lot of needs, and we're not able to really kind of show up fully to that conversation until we know what we what we have, where we are today. And that housing needs assessment will allow us to have that conversation with Commerce when they're ready, but it will also set us up for the housing element, which will be the first element that we are going to look at. As we're kind of doing phase one, we're gonna flow into phase two, where we talk about that kind of housing needs. So by then, we're hoping Commerce is ready to have those conversations. We're going to learn a little bit more about how those numbers are going to be allocated, that affordability component, those service components. And then we'll drive into the basic requirements, our consistency of best available science, our SEPA, and then obviously engagement throughout. The draft and the adoption piece are kind of future phases that will be informed by that audit. So once we complete the audit, then we'll have a better framework or understanding of where our focus needs to be in the next 32 months. So there'll be another, I'll come back to the commission, the council with more information on that. So that's where we are today. As far as what we're kind of moving on. Is there any questions, kind of what's going to happen through the end of the year here?
Council, any further questions? I don't see anybody raise their hand, Selena.
This slide, I'll just kind of touch on it. You guys can read through this. This is just here for informational purposes, because even once we adopt our comprehensive plan, we still have the whole Puget Sound Regional Council process to go through on the other side to get that certified. So the thing that we will be doing, because it will benefit us, is that we will be doing that iterative review with PSRC. So as we roll out elements, as we are looking at that data, with the help of Burke, who's going to be supporting us on this endeavor, we're going to be having those conversations early and often. This last slide here just outlines roles and responsibilities, kind of as we see folks through this process. We've got the Covington citizens and the commissions, that we want them to be engaged. We want them to provide their diverse opinions and feedback. The commission oversees the process, so they'll be working with staff to kind of, do the work. And then the council is the final decision maker on the adoption of the plan. The stakeholders and the partner agencies, that's folks that have a vested interest or a subject matter expertise in the work that we do. So fire, water, schools, our neighbors, sometimes our adjacent cities, when we're thinking about transportation. So anything that can provide the team data and information so that we're making informed decisions moving forward. This slide you can read through as well. We did this exercise with the Planning Commission about what they thought success would be in a public engagement process. And I wanted to share this with the council because they gave it a lot of thought. I love that they came up with like a real hard number of 20, like 25 is successful, right? Because we haven't had as much engagement in the past on this. And so they're really driving to really want to do a robust engagement plan and really drive folks to participate in this, and then also to meet people where they are. So I loved their ideas. So we're going to be working with them more on that plan. This is just kind of next steps. The only thing I'll point out here is that we are going to do a little bit of a roadshow with our commissions, just to kind of bring them along and have them understand what we're doing and why, so that they can also be advocates for this process. That is it. That is it for me.
Council, have any questions for Selena on this? I don't see anybody raising their hand, Selena, so thank you very much for the great presentation. And we look forward to this coming back to us throughout the process.
It will. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
And when you take things to PSRC, if you need any help from me, I'm happy to bring Regan along to talk about it.
Yeah, Regan and I have talked about that. We're ready. We're ready.
I'm sure you are. All right. Thank you very much. That was a very good presentation, Selena. Next up is to discuss the opportunity for bringing an electric scooter sharing company to Covington. Regan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm sure all of you are aware of scooter sharing programs. You've probably ridden some of those scooters in different cities that you've been in. This was something we thought that was worth looking into a little bit. So we've met with Bird Scooters, and we've got Corbin Hutchinson on here with Bird. Asked him to come here tonight to give a presentation to council. We heard some good comments at the public comment period. What's presented tonight is real preliminary, just an opportunity for you to become familiar and decide what next steps would like to be. So with that, I'll turn it over to Corbin.
Thank you, Regan. Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Corbin Hutchinson with the City Partnership Team at Bird Rides, Inc. We're based in, our address is 8605 Santa Monica Boulevard, West Hollywood, California. And thank you for having me. So I'll share my screen here to get a little presentation going here. One sec. You can see that? All right.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So yeah. All right. When Bird first started, our company really saw a huge improvement in the communities that we were launching in. We really kept us going down that path of giving people that alternative mode of transportation. And we really saw a lot of improvements to communities, but I want to focus on these four. Solving the last mile problem and connecting more residents to transit options, really reducing congestion, especially when large events or parades or things like that come to town. It's an alternative mode to get around to kind of reduce that congestion for parking. And then also giving people that alternative mode of transportation that's a little bit more environmentally friendly to hopefully improve their quality. I know a lot of people are looking for ways of transportation that would kind of suit that. So this is one of those. And then finally, one that's really important to me and that I see a lot of cities really get behind is providing a local job to the community, as well as really providing some more consumer spending with the local businesses. And I'll touch on that a little bit more down the presentation. So when we first started, it was about 5 years ago, and we were one of the first ones to really launch this type of business. And again, we saw tremendous success right off the bat. We've really launched in a handful of cities. I think right now we're upwards of 400 cities worldwide right now. So it's really a huge success to the team over the last 5 years. That's tremendous growth. And we just crossed our 100 millionth ride, which again, that's a lot of people that have taken and trusted us to kind of be the provider of an alternative mode of transportation. So we're in a ton of different cities, like I mentioned, but a lot of people, when they hear about Bird, they think of the bigger cities, and we're actually in a lot of smaller cities. So 10,000 to 100,000 is really where I'm focusing on, and it's actually where our bread and butter is from a city perspective. And one of the ways that we've been able to unlock that is through our fleet manager model. Again, I'll touch on that a little bit more. I'm kind of teasing you, so we'll get to that though. So I kind of wanted to take a step back, and if you're not familiar with the service, it's very intuitive. The scooters will be strategically placed around the city, and it's all done via the app. You create an account, read and sign the user agreement, and then input your credit card. If it's your first time, you're going to be prompted with an extensive suite of tutorials and safety videos, as well as a lot of the rules of the road, and then any local laws and rules that we want to showcase in the app to the user. But all in all, it's really just using the same kind of mode of transportation as like a bike in the sense of where they would be ridden and things like that. So one of the biggest ways that we've really been seen great success is the dockless model. And what that means is it allows the scooters to be really, people can start and end their rides wherever they want to in the operating zone. And this really gives the freedom to that rider to have a round trip or not have round trip. So in a lot of cases, in their traditional dockless or docked bike model, you actually have to bring the bike or scooter back to that docked station, which is inconvenient to a lot of the riders. And really the tremendous growth that we've seen with the spending and local businesses really support this kind of dockless model where people can end their rides wherever they see fit. So pricing is very simple. It's $1 to unlock for the rider, and then it's a per minute fee. It typically ranges from 30 to 45 cents depending on the area. We do offer a lot of equitable pricing options for people that are senior citizens, on government assistance programs, veterans, as well as healthcare workers. It's really important for us to give that opportunity to everyone, regardless of their background. So we've set up those programs for people in those situations. So once we kind of get rolling with this program with the city, we'll actually have a dedicated account manager that will be focusing on your guys' city, especially on the initial launch. We'll have someone there that will kind of work closely with you to make sure everything's fit from the city stance. And then they really work with your operations. So they're kind of going to be the go-to person once this is launched in case anything comes up or any issues occur and we want to rectify those quickly. So I put this slide in here. It really just showcases the safety rates, and what it really I want to focus on is just that it's on par with the safety of a bike. So in this study that I have here, it's about 1 in 50,000 rides was an injury. So there are injuries that happen, but it is on par with bikes. So one of the public comments that I heard was data for the cities. We actually provide all of the cities that we work with an extensive platform of data. These are just a few examples of some of the stats just on a screenshot level, but you actually can dive into these a little bit more when you guys have the data. But it shows the rider details as well as heat maps, a lot of information that's very useful for the cities, especially when you guys are looking at potentially infrastructure improvements and other things that this data could actually be very useful for when kind of looking at other projects across the city. So the operating zone is a very cool technology that we have, and it allows us to kind of have that operating zone within the city. And we can showcase this in these two screenshots, but here I want to go to the next slide real quick. This is where it gets really neat, where you actually can do slow zones and no ride zones. So for instance, if there's an area such as a skate park, that's one off the top of my head that we know we do not want scooters going into that environment, we would actually have that area as a no ride zone. And you can think of it as about an invisible fence. So riders will get to that area and will either do certain things. For example, the skate park, it might stop in that case, whereas maybe a parade or a fair or something like that, you might want to have a slower speed. So it actually reduce the vehicle speed down to say 4 to 7 miles per hour or whatever we decide on that level. But we have the technology to be very flexible with your needs in the city. So here's kind of really the thing that I've been teasing throughout the whole program is this fleet manager. And this is really the way that we've been able to unlock smaller cities. About 1.5 years ago, we started this program, and what it is it's really a community member that we will contract with. And it's someone that's going to ideally know the city very well, have a pretty good warehouse or a garage space or storage facility that they can house these scooters, but their expectations are to run the local operations. So they're going to be doing the charging, they're going to be doing the repairs as well as the rebalancing. So rebalancing just is a fancy word that we utilize that for the dockless model, scooters tend to go outside of maybe the high demand areas. So those scooters need to be brought back in to the demanded areas. And that's what these fleet managers will be looking at. So if a scooter goes off into an area that isn't necessarily the best spot for the ridership, but someone took a ride there, that fleet manager would see that on a GPS map and they would bring the scooter back to a higher demand area. And then really touching on just the local impact, this slide is something that is really interesting to me, especially the last point, the $921. And we actually tapered that down from the study, and I can send this to anyone after if interested, but it was a study done by Emory University that showed that each scooter that was placed into a city actually had an additional $921 of spend within the local community based on that spontaneous spending. And it's really neat to have these potentially options for people to get around the city that's maybe not a car. So it's really very neat to see these type of local kind of needs and the money going back to the community. So I really like that. And if anyone's interested, like I said, feel free to ask. And then finally, what we're really asking for is just to keep it simple, we're asking for approval from the city, and it's a free program. It's a mode of public transportation that's free, which is very hard to come by nowadays. This is a trial period, so it's typically what we're asking for is a 12-month period, and that will be reassessed at the end of that period. There is a carve out though, that if it is the worst case scenario, you could always take that 30 days and just give us the notice and we would be out of there within 30 days. So there is really a very low risk on you guys' end for the city, as well as our standpoint. It's a very nice agreement. So it's free for you guys and it's a trial period. So I know I've kind of went on and on about things, and I want to open it up for questions. So if anybody has any questions specifically for this, I'd be happy to address them at this time.
Council have any questions? Jennifer?
Yes, hi, thank you. I have ridden these scooters, this particular brand. It's a lot of fun. Something that I noticed was, they're not allowed on sidewalks. So it does become kind of an issue if you don't have continuous bike lane available. And so I was curious if any kind of initial assessment of Covington, specifically the downtown core, has been done to even see if this really is a viable option for our city.
Yes. So the first, to address your question, we do initial discovery on the city, and you guys have already made it past that level. That's why I'm coming to you at this point. And then the trial period is kind of that next level of testing within the city. But as far as the bike lanes, you really can think of this as where people would ride their bikes. And I want to put an emphasis on that. So if people are riding their bikes around the street, sometimes they have to go in the street. Typically, it is a rule that bikes, as well as these type of scooter devices, are not able to ride in streets that maybe are above 35 miles per hour. In those cases, it's a little dangerous. But a lot of times what people will do is they'll actually take the safest route. So they're not going to go on the extremely busy street. So they'll maybe go around a couple blocks, and it might take a little bit of extra trip, but they will take that safest path. But yes, we do discourage highly sidewalk riding.
Okay, I was curious because we have a major highway that bisects the city. I mean, it is possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Christina?
There we go. Hi, and thank you. I love 95% of all of this. It makes sense. We have a small town. We have a lot of stores within, a really close proximity. As someone who, if I were to take this scooter, like you said, it increases spending by $971 or whatever that number was. Has there been a consideration to put maybe a small basket or something attachable to the scooter that's obviously not a hindrance nor a risk factor that makes it more prone to accidents? But when I see that, I'm like, ooh, I would love that if there is like a small place I could put things. I'm not gonna, well, anyway, just food for thought, maybe something you can cover.
Yeah, no, I know that there's a lot of research and development that goes in the back end of kind of the scooters. And I know one of the biggest initiatives over the last couple reiterations of these scooters is the longevity of them. They want something that is going to last a long time. And I think the latest version is almost 5 years, that their kind of length of time that they should be, the scooter should be lasted in the environment. So adding those type of accessories on it potentially could cause damage to the scooters and things that would have to be repaired and replaced frequently. Whereas in this case, the scooter is very durable and very sturdy and can take a pretty big beating over a 5-year period of time. And that's one of the reasons why we do that. Now, that definitely is something that we could consider and look into a little bit more, as far as having that kind of basket for people to potentially carry away things a little bit more conveniently. I know in a lot of cities, I see people with just backpacks, and that's kind of their preferred route of putting things in from a local business and kind of taking it away. Or if they're just doing shopping, they have a backpack that they have. And that really is probably the best way, just from a weight standpoint. You don't really want to be holding something in your hand. That's one of the things in the tutorial that we kind of say do not do, to keep both hands on the steering and things like that. So that's one of the safety things that we kind of go over in the tutorial. Does that answer your question?
Well, yes. I mean, I would think if anything, the weight would be dropped down to the bottom, maybe to the floor of the scooter, but I'm not going to get into the intrinsic of that.
Yeah.
But yes, it does. My second really quick follow-up is, how many employees would it take for a city like Covington to even get a grasp on it? When we see store carts all over our city, I can only, I fear that we would find these scooters everywhere. And yes, it makes sense. There's going to be somebody who collects them and recharges them. How many, typically for a size like Covington, how many employees would it take, or do you know?
So as far as on the city standpoint?
Yes, you said there would be, a created job, locally. How do we know how many persons it would take to manage a city like Covington?
Yeah, so just to clarify that on the city stance, we wouldn't have any expectations of your involvement. It would all be handled by us, as well as our local operations person that we contract with.
Okay.
And that person would be incentivized, actually very, very incentivized to keep the scooters in a very orderly fashion. So they would be responsible for making sure those scooters are in the locations that they need to be. So it really would not be any burden on the city. There potentially, being candid with you, there potentially could be some cases where there are situations where people might have a complaint of a scooter in a certain situation. And in those cases, you would just relay that information to the account manager that you would be assigned to. And that person then would immediately get with our fleet manager to kind of take care of everything. So you wouldn't have to get into the weeds. You'd literally just take that message, give it to our account manager, and then we would handle everything.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? I have, Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Corbin. I appreciate the presentation. I actually rode these scooters in St. Louis and
Nice.
was very impressed with their usability. I took it down to the arch, and what I found was interesting. I didn't know this at the time, and I told Regan about this, but in certain places it went to almost stop, and I thought I'd broken the machine, and later found out it was actually that they had put those zones in where you were not allowed to ride it, or you had to go basically to a walk. And so I'm really intrigued by that. One of the things I did notice, or I thought about at the time, is I think these would require the use of helmets, or I'm not sure about state law, but how does that work? Because I think in St. Louis, technically you were supposed to wear helmets when you rode those there also, but I didn't have a helmet, and I used it anyway. So I'm just wondering about those types of things.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, the GeoZone technology is very neat. We can really cater it based on your guys' needs too, from the city stance. So if there is specific areas, we can make that specific. For the helmet, yes, it's strongly encouraged. However, it's not enforced by us. If it's a city law, it could be enforced. However, these are type of things that we really incentivize people to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And those things that we do are the in-app beginning tutorials. That is one thing. We also have the ability to get discount prices if you take a picture with like a selfie with your helmet on. And then the final thing, we actually offer a free helmet with in the app. So all the user has to do is request a helmet, and they just have to pay for shipping, and they get the helmet. And it usually is about $10. I actually just did that recently for my area.
Okay.
So yeah, we do everything in our power to get the helmets to the people. It's just that sometimes they have to make the best judgment.
What, so I'll have follow up. What is the scooter's ability to get up and downhills, obviously? And when I did it at St. Louis, there was kind of a slight grade down to the Mississippi. And so it was able to handle it coming up, but we've got some pretty steep hills here in Covington. And so I'm curious about people getting down, maybe from up where I am down to the city, but would they be able to get back up? So what's the steepest grade it could take?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I will combat that with we're operating in San Francisco, which is one of the steepest, hilliest places that you can see. So those things are taken into consideration, and actually it's going to slow down. It's not going to be as zippy as if you were on a flat, but it will get you up that hill and grade. Where I am locally, Westland, Oregon, is very hilly as well, and that just got approved there, and that was one of the considerations that they were looking at. So we could definitely, after it kind of gets into that phase of piloting, it would be interesting to see if there's any hills that really give us difficulties. But from my understanding and my kind of just seeing how other cities, it's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Go.
I just wanted to add to let Sean know, I don't know if you knew this, but King County Public Health removed the helmet law for King County. So there's no law in King County that says we have to. Still highly encouraged though.
I have a couple questions, Corbin. I had a meeting with several mayors in King County today, and they actually brought the scooters up. So, and then we had a public comment earlier. So it's like when you drive through Seattle, the scooters are a mess. They're just, and I know they're not the Bird, they're other brands, but they're in trees, they're in ditches, they're in dumpsters, waterways. Is the account manager going to be responsible for getting that cleaned up? And how long do they have to get that cleaned up?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I am happy to address because it's actually a very easy question to address. The fleet manager model, so that individual that's local, is going to be that key to help that go away. Also, a lot of these bigger cities, they have 5-6 operators with thousands of scooters each that they're bringing. So the demand's not for that many scooters. It might be only 1 or 2, but they have to allow maybe 4 or 5 operators within that city. In your guys' case, you might only have us, maybe one other scooter company. And from us, we're going to start with a very conservative approach from scooters coming into it, and then we'll work up based on demand. So you won't have that crazy amount of scooters coming into the town. It will be very small, and then we'll work it up based on demand. But to answer your question on who's going to kind of keep that when cases where they go into the water or things like that, which is very infrequent, actually, it just it gets spread a lot when it happens. That fleet manager, the local person, would be responsible for kind of managing those expectations and taking care of that. And to address the timeline, typically it's in 4 hours. That's usually about a good approximate timeline to just get the communication from point A to point B.
Okay, if a scooter comes up missing, who's responsible for that?
So we take care of all scooters. The fleet manager is not even responsible for those type of situations. The GeoZone technology and GPS technology will allow us to track it. So we have the availability to go track it down if it does go missing or go out of the zone. I will say that if the vehicle is not unlocked, the scooter's wheels are locked. So it's very difficult to actually move the scooter, and you have to actually carry it, which it weighs about 50 to 60 pounds. Now that said, it can be done, but that fleet manager would be responsible for kind of going to collect those. But we are responsible for all scooters if they get in accidents and things like that. And to touch on public comment earlier, and I know this is a very interesting topic, but the indemnification, we will indemnify the city as well as add you guys to the insurance policy, our insurance policy.
Okay, thank you. And So since these are dockless, how long does a scooter charge last?
Yeah, so typically it's like about 2 days of use, which is equivalent to about 30 miles of kind of scooter driving time. And then that fleet manager would then see when it gets to about a 25% capacity on the battery, and they would collect that scooter and charge it within their local warehouse, garage space, or storage unit. We typically try to take scooters off the field when it's like around 25% capacity, just so a person doesn't get on it with 25%, ride it, and can't make it to their destination.
Okay. That's all I have for right now. Thanks, Corbin. Does anybody else have any other questions? Beth?
No, thank you, Mayor. So, Corbin, what would you estimate the per mile or per minute cost would be for our area?
So probably around like the lower end, maybe like a 35 cent per minute. Typically, on average, like a ride for a user is between $6 to $7. So sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's more, but yeah, just average probably 6 to 7.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, Corbin, thank you very much for bringing this to us. Regan, it says here it's just provide direction. What kind of direction would you like from us?
So I think if this is something council would like us to pursue further, then we'll meet with Corbin and start moving forward and bring an agreement back to council.
Is there consensus from council? Give me a thumbs up that bring this back. I see 1, 2, 3, 4.
Do we have to address our code though? Did I see something that we have to change our Covington municipal code, which that's going to require?
Mark, do you want to jump in on that?
Sure, thank you very much. And that is one approach that we would be looking into. There are many ways to regulate these kinds of uses in the city. One is through an agreement and one is through code provisions. And so we just put that line in there to make sure that council knew that that is an opportunity and that's something we would be exploring and working through during whatever process we follow with Bird or any other providers of scooters.
Okay, so we have a thumbs up again if we want to bring this back to council. Okay, so the consensus is to go ahead and move forward on this and bring it back, and then we can have a further discussion at that time. Does that work, Regan?
Yes, yeah, that works. Corbin, if you just want to reach out to me, we'll get something set up.
Yeah, thank you everyone for having me, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks, Corbin. Thank you for being here tonight. Next up is the quarterly report of the Council Subcommittee on Public Safety. So it's Beth, Sean, and Joe who is going to bring this update. I didn't see anything.
Beth's going first, I think.
Yeah, Krista is going to share a PowerPoint. I'll try to keep it brief, just since we've been presented out this this meeting.
Give me a moment here. I somehow didn't realize that. Let me go ahead and pull it up here. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Okay. Next slide. So just as a reminder for those in the audience, the purpose of the subcommittee was that 3 of us on council and Regan were going to gather data to bring back to the city council. Part of the impetus was, should we stay within King County Sheriff's Office? Should we try to look at options if we decide to form our own police department? What would that look like? What services should we provide? How many officers would we want? Any additional behavioral health specialists, and even passive SIP-TED policies to help improve safety in the city of Covington. So our goals were to gather options. You'll hear some of the options that other cities have done, and Sean will talk about some of the conversations that he and Reagan had with other city managers and city council. things that they've done and the costs and so forth associated. And then just to recap recent items, we've had about 5 meetings so far. We meet probably about every 3 weeks. And the focus so far has been on looking at what other cities have been doing, what the cost might potentially be for Covington for various options, and then thinking about how we could fund, as we all know, even just expanding our police, even if we kept things status quo, would require significant sustainable income, and what some of those possibilities might look like. Next slide. So again, I just talked about some of the reasons for additional funding. It would be a significant cost to the city and an ongoing cost, not just a one-time cost for a lot of these things that we were looking at potentially doing. Some of the funding options that we want to make sure that everybody's clear that we're considering everything and looking at all of the options so that we can bring that information back to council. We looked at some of the sales tax ballot measures that the Prop 1s that had been put before the public over the last 9 years. Or they were for transportation, but there was about a 50-50 split in 2013, an 11% abstention rate, meaning not everyone that voted in that election actually voted for or against this. And then 2018, the spread got a little bit wider, and a lot more people actually did vote for or against it. So, that might be a bit of a temperature reading on people's appetite for sales tax increases, but again, depending on what it's for. And then so the other option would potentially be a B&O tax, since a lot of our businesses were in the center, in the corridor. This is where we see it most bluntly, with graffiti and trash and shoplifting and those types of things. So the difference between the B&O, obviously it could be passed councilmatically. We don't have to put it to the public. We can go up to 0.2% of gross receipts, which would generate $2 million if that was something the council decided to do at that 0.2%. Some other things that have been discussed are possible exemptions based on the type of business or the size. But one of the biggest things was to make sure that we're actively involving stakeholders. That was something that that as a council, we decided that was something that was important. So the next step was to do have a B&O survey out to our businesses. Next slide. So for the B&O survey creation, Regan worked with CEDAS to formulate some questions. He also met with Chamber and got feedback from them on the B&O tax and their appetite to support. I think we heard from them tonight. I think it sounds like Mark with Multicare summed up what the feeling was from a lot of the Chamber businesses. And then of course, the subcommittee, we also gave some input on what the questions might look like and what we thought was important. And then in April, council members in Regan visited businesses and distributed the surveys and encouraged everybody to give their feedback. Next slide, please. And you all have already received the results. So, I don't want to go through everything, but, out of the 42 businesses completed the survey, which is about a 20% return rate we're estimating. Over half of them have been in business for over 10 years. Larger numbers on business owners feeling that crime has increased. Their customers have complained about crime, 65%. 90.48% say their business would benefit from additional officers that enabled to provide quicker response times. And 85% feeling that providing enhanced public safety would help them continue to do business in Covington. And just under 73% believe that hiring additional officers, implementing the crime prevention strategies, and hiring a business liaison officer would benefit their business. So there seems to be support for additional resources put towards safety in different methods. Next slide, please. So when it came to actually supporting a B&O tax for public safety, it's kind of a split between yes, no, and unsure. if a B&O tax was dedicated to a specific use, the numbers went up. 53% said yes, 36% no, and which is interesting because in the question right before it, there was a specific use listed. So there was a little bit of ambiguity about what that might mean. And for folks that answered no, would you be more likely to support a B&O if revenues were left unrestricted? That was definitely not something that seemed to get a favorable response. So they want to make sure that the money's going for something specific. Next, and then just summarize a couple of comments. Said about 6 out of the 17 were relating more to wanting more information on the plan and more specifics, and also would want to know what our current taxes are going towards before adding anything extra. You know, 4 of the responses had to do with uncertainty that the funds would be used correctly and that there would be a need for accountability and public oversight. One of them said they already pay too many taxes already. Funds must come from a state level, and there was some additional comments there, but that was the gist of it. And everybody, not just businesses, should be taxed for safety of our community. And there was another question about small business, or concern about small pandemic era business that got started and their costs are increasing, and trying to use federal funds rather than impose another tax. And then out of those comments that we got, only 4 out of, I'm sorry, that should be 17. 4 of them just responded with not applicable or unsure. So, you know, so that they were a bit all over the board on that. We can think about that as a council about how we feel about that. But I think there's definitely an openness to having a B&O tax if the plan is laid out and it is going for safety measures. So I think next slide. Okay, so this is going to be where Sean takes over and talks about some of the stuff done with other cities.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna actually talk a little in general terms to start. You know, this safety committee that Beth and Joe and I sit on, we're taking a holistic approach to improve public safety. So kind of looking at a broad spectrum of strategies to improve public safety. And we recognize that's what's needed. So we recognize that there's a role for all to play in this process, from the community to businesses to the city council, but also the legislature, prosecutors, community service providers, judges, and others. And there's a part that Covington plays in all of that, but we're also looking to identify what are those other potential strategies that maybe other players can take as well. So as Beth mentioned, one of the options we're considering is new revenue sources that can be dedicated to public safety. As you heard, we've reached out to the business community to gauge their interest in supporting this effort. Broadly, the business community shares the council's safety concerns and supports a wide range of solutions. And so we'll have to continue to work with them and do outreach to the community on what additional revenues we may need and how we would dedicate those to specific strategies and tactics for public safety. So I just thought I'd give a explanation of a couple of things. So one of the solutions obviously includes new staff. The city council has been consistent in its desire to add police officers to our force. Years ago, we set a goal of adding 1 new police officer every 2 years, but there's been some recent changes in state law as well as the COVID pandemic that have made it difficult to retain or hire new officers. So however, I'm kind of speaking for Beth and Joe here, the safety committee remains committed to this goal. And the city, I think, continues to communicate with the county on how we're going to fill our officer needs. So that's something that we'll continue to work on. Yet we also recognize that police officers are just one part of the public safety puzzle. Securing basic needs like housing, food, clothing, and mental health support are also key to keeping our community safe. And as such, the city recently posted a job description for a community care specialist. This person will assess the mental health needs of specific aspects of our community and help acquire the necessary mental health services and subsequently refer those in need to those services. So as I said earlier, we're taking a broad spectrum approach to this issue, because it's not just going to be, no pun intended, there's no silver bullet that can fix all this, but there's a number of things we can do. Outreach will continue to be an effective tool in protecting public safety. Meetings like the upcoming Coffee with a Cop are excellent opportunities for the community members to ask questions and share their ideas on how to better protect our community's business and neighbors and property. So, the last part, the safety committee also knows that our neighboring communities can help us achieve our mutual goals of public safety. As such, community members reached out to several cities to get their thoughts on the matter. And most notably, we contacted neighboring communities about their current public safety issues and the possibility of partnering with Covington on providing police resources. So I'm going to talk about a couple and some of the feedback we've received. So Regan spoke with I spoke with Kent and their city officials about possibly contracting. That's one of the things, one of the messages. I'll just step back, that we've reached out to a number of cities about partnering with them. Kent was one of the first. And so, as I said, contracting with the city of Kent for police services. They evaluated their capacity to provide these services and determined that they would not be able to provide that to Covington at this time. So we'll have to look elsewhere for regional partners. But we also spoke with Issaquah about the possibility of contracting for police services. Issaquah stated that they believe they would be able to contract with us. They also indicated that they have a vaccine mandate, just to let us know. So we're seeing a number of nuances with contracting or partnering with other communities that we have to work through. Another city that's interested in partnering with us is Renton. The city's new city administrator is their old police officer, and he was very much in favor of providing services to Covington. In fact, stated they have a number of officers that actually live in Covington. So that's an interesting opportunity as well. CTAC, we reached out to them. They originally had sent a letter to King County stating they were considering leaving the contract. Like I said, submitted a notice to King County about pulling out. Regan spoke with their city manager about the process and if they intended to rescind their notice. And it appears that they plan to remain in the contract at this time. So I think they've had some conversations with the county about increasing the quality of service to them. So they plan on staying. We did get a copy of their public services study, which they did back in 2019. And the findings indicate that the cost, it could cost substantially more per officer to provide police services in-house as opposed to using the current contracting model. But that is given that all things stay the same. So if maybe cost per officers go up or additional legislative changes come down, that may change that calculus. So a couple more cities just to mention. North Bend used to be part of the King County contract, but they pulled out due to in part long response times. So again, Regan spoke with them and they stated they are currently contracting with Snoqualmie after pulling out of King County. The cost did go up when they left the contract, but they also still have mutual aid agreements with other communities like Issaquah. So, and then finally, I spoke with Maple Valley a while back. They are experiencing, as you can probably imagine, similar public safety issues to those here in Covington. In the past, they reminded us that they had approached Covington at one time about partnering on providing police services. At that time, which was, I think, before almost all of us, except maybe Jeff, were on the council, we were interested in staying with the contract. However, given changing conditions here in Covington, we once again reached out to Maple Valley about the idea And our neighbor to the east is still interested in having these conversations. And interestingly, they also, Maple Valley has a public safety committee, and they suggested that at a minimum, our two cities safety committees meet to discuss some of the findings and issues that we're seeing. So there may be an opportunity there to pool some of our resources. So stay tuned for that. So as I stated, it's going to take a broad spectrum of approaches to improve public safety, and the safety committee is actively discussing and investigating these options available to all of us. So I think it's now Joe's turn. Thank you.
Yes, it is now my turn. So our next steps, what we have to, so the chamber's hosting an open house on June 27th at City Hall to discuss the B&O tax with all the different businesses. We as a council are invited, and the members of the subcommittee along with city staff are going to be providing content for it along with part of the presentation probably. We are going to discuss exemption options for businesses, and that really means what options we have for exempting certain types of businesses, or what thresholds businesses have to meet before they start paying into the B&O tax, and go for there. We'll discuss that and bring that back to council. We are also going to be putting together flyers for Covington Days. And those will be so we can get information out to the residents of Covington, out to the people who come in and shop in Covington, so they understand what's going on. And Covington Days is a great way to get feedback from everybody, because they're there and they don't have a problem with telling us what they think when they're out there at Covington Days. So it's one of those joys. Plus, it's a great thing to be able to have those impromptu get-togethers with our constituents and see what they're really feeling. Let's see, where else am I here? So we're going to be discussing other revenue options besides just the B&O tax. There are other revenue streams available out there. We just know the B&O tax is one of the ones that we can get to quicker than some of them. So we're going to discuss them. We're going to find out, and we're going to get our options on the table. We don't want to have just one option. We want to have all the options. And then we are going to, along with those flyers that we'll be creating for Covington Days, we're going to be creating a public safety education plan. So that way we can plan for how to tell everybody about the public safety needs, along with the needs for our that the residents have for us, so that we want to know what they have so we can go out there and educate them on what we need to do to get those. So that's kind of the way we're leaning to. I'm sure you all will have questions for us that we're all willing to answer, and all questions we will point to Regan to answer, of course. But if anyone has questions, we are willing to answer. And if we don't know the answer, again, we'll point to Regan.
Thank you. Jennifer.
First of all, thank you for meeting and collecting all of this information. As an individual and as a council member, I really appreciate it. My question is regarding timelines. When do you expect to have recommendations for us? After the things that were on this last slide, or I mean, what are you thinking?
I'll answer that for myself. I hope to have some good recommendations to everyone by August. For me personally, I want to have some good, because we'll have had those conversations at Covington Days. We'll have had more conversations together, and we'll have gotten some more information, because we may not have another meeting until June, but that doesn't mean we're not going to be all doing our homework and trying to figure out what's going on. So my hope is August. I'm sure Beth and Sean have different hopes, or maybe the same, but those are my thoughts at this moment.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Maybe not that late as August, but I would like to collect a little bit more information. I'd love to have the chamber meeting on the B&O tax take place before we make our recommendations. And I think at some point we are going to want to circle in the community to see somehow how we can incorporate their input onto this. So yeah, my vision or idea is to have some type of memo or report that we can provide to the council that has, like I said, a broad spectrum of recommendations and yeah, recommendations on what we can do here in Covington to improve public safety. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was discussed is that the B&O open house in June is specifically catered towards the businesses, but that it would probably be a good idea to have something similar for the public. And you know, if as a council we decided that we wanted to try to put something on the ballot rather than just pass a B&O tax, it wouldn't make the November ballot unless we made that decision by like the first week of August. So we would have to, there's going to be a tipping point where we have to decide, is that the way we want to go, or do we want to wait till next year on that and then figure out what our filing dates would be for that. And then once we file for it, we can't talk about it with the public from the city's perspective. It has to be done on a pro or con committee level.
Okay.
Christina, do you have any questions?
My only question is, do you feel like this is advancing with more hope or more questions? Do we feel like we're narrowing or expanding? And both are good. It's just at some point we'll have to narrow down our options. And do you feel like they're solid options?
I'll jump in. I think right now we're still collecting information. So, you know, we're getting ideas. So like before we spoke with surrounding communities, we didn't have an idea of the number that would be interested in partnering with us and the level at which they would be interested. So that the idea of getting out of the contract was kind of more, well, we could do that, but how would that even be possible? So I guess in one sense, yes, it is becoming more narrow on that we've got some potential partners that would be willing to take next steps with us. And in other ways, kind of like the thing with the B&O, we're still trying to figure out the level of support for that and what other, if that doesn't pan out, what other potential revenue sources would there be? So I guess a little bit of both.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. I think they're both necessary. I still am going to stand my ground, and I think that I know we've brought it to the public several times on ballot, but on a ballot measure, but I just think the tides have turned and people, I remember running in 2019 and I had questions like, no, we don't have any safety issues. We don't have public safety concerns. A lot of people said that, and we see what happened in the last 2.5 years. And I just really think people's hearts have pivoted. Their minds have pivoted. They see that we have to do something. And I hope we can move forward with that one as well. Thank you.
So going with that, and thank you for a very good presentation, Sean, Beth, and Joe. I appreciate you doing all the research and stuff. So you said August. So do you feel comfortable that you could possibly bring back a recommendation for our August 9th council meeting? Because we typically do not have a council meeting at the end of August, which would be the 23rd. I'm not trying to rush it. I'm just trying to put a potential timeline, which means you'd have to have it to Regan and Krista by the 1st of August so they could put it in the agenda for the 9th. Is that a possibility? Or
yeah, I think we can shoot for that, you know, and I think Beth and Joe and I can talk and then put our schedules together. But yeah, I think that's something we can definitely shoot for.
Yeah, I think just to pony onto that, we might potentially need support from other council members, especially if we're doing that public outreach piece or having meetings. And it seems like a lot of work, but I think we're at that point where, people need to realize how much money's left in the budget. If they don't want tax, something's gonna have to get cut. So if we want to keep things status quo and we want to enhance and augment certain services, something will have to be done. And I think that's going to be the linchpin, and that would happen probably likely in July. So we have a lot going on in July to gather all that information.
Regan?
If I might interject, I think putting a date of our first August meeting might be a pretty tight timeline. Just because as a subcommittee, we really just started talking about I worked with the chamber to get the chamber open house set up for businesses. But if we're wanting to also do a public open house, we haven't decided on a date or any planning for that. So I'll get an email out to the subcommittee on that so we can get planning it. But during the summer, that's just going to be hard to do. Probably a mid to late July, and then trying to turn around in the next week and have a material ready for council would be really tough. So I think realistically, August, if we want to do a public open house and some of the other things, would be really difficult.
Okay. That makes sense, Regan. And I've already committed to the chamber that I'll be there on the 27th. They reached out to me personally to make sure I was there, and I'm happy to be there to help answer questions as well. So I guess we'll wait to hear, Regan, from you and the subcommittee on when that comes back. If we need to do public outreach, because if we're going with B&O, it's mostly just businesses that we need to hear back from on that, because they're the ones that are going to be paying it. If we're going to go out for a ballot measure, then yeah, we'd want to get the public involved on that as well.
So I think the subcommittee, what I'm hearing tonight, wants to do a public open house on the B&O, not just one for the businesses. Is that what I'm hearing? I thought that's.
Is that what all three of you want?
I think some type of public, I don't know if it's so much on B&O, but some type of public vehicle for them to provide input on, some of the things they're seeing and how they would suggest the city address public safety. Where would they like to see us put our resources, and what are those additional resources they'd like to see us pursue or dedicate to this. So
I think that's probably a next step for us as a committee then to determine what that's going to be. And then I think the plan is to just give periodic updates to council as we move forward. And once we've gathered the information, done all the public outreach, then we'd get it on an agenda for recommendations.
That sounds good, Regan. Thank you. All right. So we'll just wait to hear back on the next quarterly update from the subcommittee on where we're at. All right. Sean, Beth, and Joe, thank you very much for a detailed report. Really appreciate you taking the time, working with Regan and everybody else to get the outreach done and see our best method. I mean, I guess putting August date on there is, we don't want to rush this, but we also don't want to keep kicking the can down the road. We need to make a decision, but we want to have as much information as possible to do that. And that finding that right time to bring it back to do that decision is key.
Yeah, and I think the reason with August would be is if we were to put something on the ballot for November. So that could bump out to February or something if that was what we choose to do.
All right.
Good time for that.
All right. Anything else on this topic? All right. Thank you again very much. Appreciate you bringing this forward to us. Next is new business item number 7, appoint a voting delegate of the 2022 Puget Sound Regional Council General Assembly. On this item, the General Assembly is in May on the 26th. I currently serve on the executive board. I am happy to be the voting delegate for the PSRC General Assembly, but Joe.
I move that Jeff Wagner be our voting delegate for the PSRC General Assembly.
Second.
Thank you, Joe. Been moved and seconded to appoint Jeff Wagner as the voting delegate to represent the city of Covington at the 2022 General Assembly. Joe, would you like to speak to your motion?
You're already going to be there, so I figured why not? And no offense, I don't think none of the rest of us wanted the job to begin with. So
it's only a 2.5 hour meeting.
Yeah, but you drew the short straw. So, and I have full faith in you to represent the city well. So,
thank you, Joe. Jennifer, would you like to speak to your second?
You continue to do an amazing job representing us, so I wholeheartedly support the motion.
Thank you, Jennifer. Is there anybody else wishing to speak for or against the motion? All right, it's been moved and seconded to appoint Jeff Wagner as the voting delegate to represent the city of Covington at the 2022 General Assembly on May 26th. Call for a roll call vote. Sean, how do you vote?
Aye.
Christina, how do you vote?
Aye.
Jennifer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Joe, how do you vote?
Aye.
Beth, how do you vote?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Is unanimous to appoint Jeff Wagner to the PSRC General Assembly. Krista, will you send that information to PSRC, please?
Yes, I was just emailing you to ask who do I send that to? So if we can chat offline about that, that would be great.
I will get that taken care of.
Thank you.
Krista. That concludes all of our new business. Is there anything the council would like to see as a future agenda item down the road? All right, seeing nobody, we will move into council staff comments. Start with Adam. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple things. We met with Congressman Schreiers and we got to discuss, very receptive, and we took her on a ride along and thought that went pretty well. She has some ideas and feedback of what might help us in the future. And then I want to highlight an arrest we made actually this afternoon. We had someone ram one of our police cars a couple weeks ago. Through some help with Maple Valley and with our detective here, we were able to figure out who did it. We set up to try to arrest him today, and we ended up finding some other really bad guy, and we took him to jail instead, and we'll get him next time because we just couldn't find him. So we did that with Maple Valley, which was quite successful, and we will continue to partner with them to try to find this person again. So that's it.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate the update. Ethan, welcome.
Good evening. Nothing from me tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Ethan. Don, welcome.
Thank you. Just wanted to say thank you for the support and the proclamation for Public Works Week.
Thank you, Don. Selena, welcome.
Hi, I have just one thing. I'm not sure if this news made it to the council yet, but we have hired a code compliance officer to help with our code compliance. So many of you know Brian Byconen has been serving kind of these dual capacities, and until I find a planner, he will continue to serve some dual capacity. But we are bringing on an officer that will kind of help get us caught up, hopefully. We've got some program work ahead of us, but her name is Christina Higgins. She worked at the city of Black Diamond prior to this in code enforcement and permits, and she's actually a resident of Covington. So we are excited to bring her along. She will be onboarding at the end of May and doing some ride-alongs with Brian throughout the summer to get her up to speed on the work ahead in code compliance. And that's all.
Thank you, Selena.
Yeah.
Casey.
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Regan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a little bit of addition to add on police costs. We talked a little bit about that in the subcommittee's report. We just received some additional numbers for our contract for 2023. There's the addition of body-worn cameras, there's labor negotiation, salary increases, there's still some additional increases that are pending, there's risk insurance, that's increasing. And so it looks like in 2023, our contract will increase by about just over $400,000, which is a really massive increase. That's for all the contracts. So Sean talked a little bit about, where's that threshold of when the price keeps increasing. So we just received these numbers the other day. Some of those are one-time costs, like purchasing the cameras, but there is additional operation and maintenance and replacement costs and whatnot. So that 400 is about a pretty fair forecast of what that will be going forward, ongoing. So that's just something to be aware of. Casey and I have met about working that into our next year's budget already. So just a heads up to council. Also, we've talked about our AV equipment coming in for the council chambers so that we can begin meeting in person, beginning our second meeting in June. However, since we had that discussion, the governor has rescinded his emergency proclamation. And so beginning June 1st, we will be required to have a physical location for all public meetings. So the plan now has been to move that up one meeting. So at our June, I think it's June 14th is our first meeting. So we will meet in person. We'll hopefully have all of our AV equipment in place. So there'll still be that virtual element that will be required, or at least telephonically. People still need to be able to participate virtually or telephonically. So we'll have that set up. But June 14th is our new in-person date. And as we're working the new virtual equipment, be patient with Mason and Krista as they're working very, very hard to make that work and doing a great job. So that's all I had, Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks, Regan. Mark?
Thank you very much, Mayor Wegner. Just briefly, I wanted to jump on with what Regan was saying about the OPMA. The OPMA rules are going to go back on June 1st, but the emergency declaration for everything else is remaining in place. So there still is a state of emergency to respond to the COVID-19 emergency. We are just no longer going to have those restrictions removed for meetings. Regan and I have spoken about this, and something I'll be bringing back to council most likely in June is revisiting council rules about these virtual meetings, because I think we have a lot of lessons learned in the past couple of years, even since we updated the rules in 2021. So I'm going to be coming back to council to have a discussion about that and see what council direction and where you would like to go with that, and whether the rules are where you like them, or if we can make some tweaks to fit this new reality that we're in. And one final last thing is I want to thank council for their passage of the flag policy. The United States Supreme Court just came out with a case against a city for not raising someone's flag when it was requested, and our policy is in compliance with what is now law across the entire country. So there's no other executive session tonight, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Krista?
Yes, just a reminder that we do have a special meeting next Tuesday, May 17th, starting at 6:30 p.m. We'll have a reception with the Kent School District Board, and then the meeting will be called to order at 7 p.m. So we look forward to seeing you there in person in council chambers. And if you are able to bring some sort of dish for the potluck, then we would appreciate that. And that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Krista. Sean?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I really appreciated tonight's meeting with CEDIS. It's really exciting to see all the ideas and energy going into branding Covington and making it providing it the X factor. As we were sitting, afterward, I kind of thought, a tagline, if it hasn't already been taken for Covington, maybe is something like Covington has got it. And then that's up to us to define what it is, or it's up to everyone to determine what it is. But we're definitely headed in that direction. The only other thing I'll mention, I did attend the SCA legislative briefing, and the they had a panel of 8 lawmakers, and the 2 issues that captured the most attention or the most discussion as you probably can imagine, are the missing middle legislation on housing, and then transportation. And as I mentioned earlier, I strongly believe the legislature will continue to look at the missing middle aspects of housing in Washington State. And so with our upcoming comprehensive plan, I think we have an opportunity to show that the community has the ability to address those issues without mandates that remove our authority to manage our own city. So I guess what I'm saying is I think we need to take advantage of this opportunity, because I think it's coming back around in the next legislature. Although there was quite a bit of talk about the potential impact upon communities, especially stormwater infrastructure, if the previous version of the missing middle bill had passed. And so I think that's a hurdle that would still need to be addressed, is how that adding, say, 6 new units on a current lot that had 1, how would we address the infrastructure needs for it? So something to think about. So that's it.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Christina.
Wonderful meeting. Thank you for all the information. It was very productive. Nothing for me.
Thank you, Christina. Jennifer.
Just wanted to add that I'm continuously impressed by our amazing commissions, and great that our commissioners are out roping in more commissioners. That really made me happy, and just all of the great ideas from CDISC. I mean, these people are just volunteering their time to make our city great, and that is what makes Covington great. If somehow we could just make the people the Project X, that would be amazing. So yeah, and thank you to all of you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Joe.
Thanks. So along with the police department meeting with Representative Schreier last week, Christina, Beth, and I also met with Representative Schreier before her meeting. Regan was there as well. And we talked about our needs for public safety. And forgive me, Regan, I did have to get up to take care of something with the kids really quickly while you were talking. So I don't know if you said this, but there are other funding options we can look into. Are some grants from the federal level for some of those startup costs through Representative Schreier's office. So that's another option for some startup funds, but again, that's just going to be one-time funds that we would have. Other than that, PIC is canceled for May, so we will meet again in June. So no update for you guys for PIC. SKIP, I had a long conversation with Angela from SKIP and from Mayor Nancy Bacchus from Auburn about some of the things that a lot of us, at least 3 or 4 of us, the executive board members had communicated with each other or through the grapevine to each other. And we gave some ideas for how we can make some improvements. We have a meeting on the 20th, so I will let you know how that goes at our next meeting on the 24th. Keep you guys updated on that. I may just present a written report that I'll let you know how that goes as well. Other than that, I will have a 15-year-old tomorrow, so it's kind of got to start teaching them how to drive. So Chief, if you start seeing some crazy guy in a white Ford driving around with his head in a helmet, just don't worry about it. It's me teaching my kid how to drive.
Thank you, Joe. Were you going to say something, Chief?
Yeah, I have a almost 16-year-old now that I've been starting to teach how to drive, so I feel your pain.
Thank you. Thank you.
Christina, do you have a question?
Yes, can we get those implemented into cars where if you drive into a zone, it just slows down for you, or like stops at stop signs and red lights?
There you go.
Make the call to Detroit.
Beth.
Well, I don't have anyone that's learning how to drive. I do remember being a 15-year-old learning how to drive too. So I'm sure my parents are we're going through the same pain, but no, great meeting. Thanks everybody. Looking forward to what work we're going to be doing in the next few months. And our next meeting then in person will be on June 14th, which I believe is Flag Day, right? So maybe we can do something fun, flag related or themed.
Also my 25th wedding anniversary, just a heads up.
Okay, there you go. My nephew's birthday too, so hey, lots of things. Okay.
I'll accept chocolate, flowers, whatever.
So, just a quick update. It was a great meeting. I always enjoy hearing from CEDAS and the Chamber Board for our joint meeting. And our commissioners are outstanding. I agree, Jennifer, seeing how they are always recruiting people. Quick update on SCA. We have reached out, the executive board of SCA has reached out and is receiving, we received some proposals in our request to look for a new executive director to replace Deanna. And we will be choosing that group on Friday the 13th is when our next meeting is for the executive. And then we will be bringing that suggestion to the board next week. And then we will start looking for answers for people and to help replace her. Brian Perry has been, or during our board meeting, we will suggest that Brian Perry act as the interim executive director. And I will give an update on everything else that we'll be taking action on at that board meeting. It'll be a long board meeting next week. With that, I do not have anything else, and we will move into our second public comment period. Speakers will state their name, address, and organization. Comments are directed to the city council, not the audience or staff. Comments are not intended for conversation or debate and are limited to no more than 4 minutes per speaker. Notice to all participants, pursuant to state law RCW 42.17a.555, campaigning for any ballot measure or candidate in City Hall and or during any portion of the council meeting, including the audience comment portion of the meeting, is prohibited. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to address council this evening? Seeing nobody raise their hand and no executive session tonight, this meeting is adjourned at 9:49. Thank you all very much, and I hope you all have a very wonderful evening. Thank you.
Good night.